Welcome, everybody. We're going to be having an amazing session as we're going to be talking about a superpower that a lot of us have never knew that we could use. So for everybody that's new here, my name is Jason Campbell. We're just getting set up here with our live stream, so thank you so much for joining. If you're watching, do tell us where you're from. We do this every week. We start at around 9:30 p.m. to make sure that, oh, and by the way, that is Bali time, so it might be 9:30 a.m. if you're coming in from the New York, Florida, Miami area, and maybe even from Canada. So I'm trying to see where are people. We got some upstate New York. Tony, thanks for tuning in. We got Minnesota. So Shella, thanks for tuning in. Hi from Mercury. I feel like this would be a different planet. So thanks for tuning in to our Earthcast. This is going to be a lot of fun. So what we've been doing every single week is talking about a really cool topic. And here at Mindvalley, every single week, we try to bring some new ideas, new concepts so that we can turn you into the best version of who you can be as a human being. My name is Jason Campbell. I am a host here at Mindvalley. I host the Superhumans at Work podcast, and I'm coming to you live on YouTube so we can talk about whatever is the relevant topic of this week. We're talking about speed reading. We're talking about Jim Kwik. For those of you who've ever seen an ad, I know you're on YouTube. If you're a fan of Mindvalley, I know you've seen an ad about Jim Kwik. It's by no chance that what we've realized is when we get people to unlock a superpower in learning and in speed reading, we can go and consume so many more things and be able to actually bring more knowledge into our minds. Because would you agree that knowledge is power? And so if you've seen Jim Kwik, definitely give a heads up to Jim. We have also a moderator, Darren, who's going to be monitoring your comments. And so if you're watching a replay, know that what we do every time we do this is we have a bit of a session where I'll share some of my interpretation of a lot of the things we discussed this week at Mindvalley. Once we finish the video, we do a live Q&A with the audience. So if you're tuning in live, you can use the comment section, say, hi, Darren. He's going to be watching your comments, pulling some of your questions in the process. So with that, I want to just get right into it. So we're talking here about super reading. So for those of you who might not know, Mindvalley is doing a masterclass this week on super reading. This is actually going through a training with Vishen Lakhiani, the founder of Mindvalley, and Jim Kwik for absolutely free, where for under an hour, you will learn the concepts that you can apply around speed reading. And you can do so by just using the link that's being shared in the comments. Darren, my friend, is going to go ahead and put that link up there. This is something that you can choose the time you want to watch, and it's filled with amazing information. Again, a little shout out to some of you who are coming in live. We have Prathamesh coming in from India at 7 p.m. We have Roshan from Nepal. We have Aaron from Egypt. We even have Jasmine from Connecticut. So truly a worldwide audience. I'm super excited that you get to join. Really excited to share some of these insights because here's what's really interesting about this idea of a quest on super reading. So I was probably the most skeptical person when it comes to speed reading. And the reason being is that I always thought that the best way to read faster was actually to grab audiobooks. So I don't know if some of you are fans of Audible. I know that I still use that service, but I've realized that there's some limitations that happen when I use an audiobook. First off, I don't know, what is the speed that you would listen to an audiobook? Is it 1 time, 1.5 times, 2 times? I guess it depends on the topic and how much I want to pay attention to it, but here's something that I've realized when I go through audiobooks is that I can only go through a certain amount of words per minute based on what I can hear from the person. And I actually never realized that you can actually go so much faster with speed reading than what you could ever do using audiobooks. And one of the reasons is because the very nature of how you use audiobooks actually is limiting. And this is one of the things that fascinated me about speed reading. So if you're tuning in, know that we're going to be talking about some of the problems that come from our regular reading and how we can solve them with speed reading. I went through this quest 2 years ago. I was actually one of the guinea pigs to go through it. And I was pretty amazed because I started off around 230 words per minute when I would be reading at my regular speed. And after going through this quest, I actually found myself being in the 650 to 700 range. And the first time I did it, I actually did a test and I realized that I was actually maybe at around a 400 range, and I thought I was going to triple my reading speed. So expectations were set high, and here I was disappointed because I only kind of doubled. And what I realized is when I was reading the first book, which I ended up finishing because I was taking the quest, and in the process of finishing the quest, I finished this book that had a certain number of words per line. And when I was doing the new measurement, I assumed I had the number of words per line the same, but no, this new book had more words per line. So in essence, I ended up having a ridiculously high reading speed and I didn't realize it. Finished the course and found myself with with a lot more done than I thought. So when we start speed reading, like, what do we know? Do you already have any information around speed reading? I realize here about making videos on fast speaking. Maybe I am speaking very fast, so I'll make sure I keep the pace up for you guys. So if you want to pick up a book and you want to read, what are some of the questions that you would have when it comes to speed reading? I know for me, first thing I thought was comprehension would go down. I also thought that I wouldn't even be able to connect the dots from the ideas that I would be putting together. And so here's what I realized when I started picking up these ideas around speed readings. There was 3 big problems I had when I was just reading regularly. And the first one was the fact that, as I mentioned, if I pick up an audiobook, I can go to 1.5, maybe I can go to 2 times the speed. But did you know that when we were taught to read, right? Go back to when we were children. We would stand in class and we would read in front of the whole class. If any of you went through some elementary process, at least in Canada, this is how they made us do it. I don't know about you. But what I realized is I learned that when I read, I should be reading out loud. So instead, when I read by myself, I read the words in my head. And I thought this was just a normal way of reading. Well, very quickly, after speed reading with Jim Kwik and learning that this is actually a concept called sub-vocalization. Sub-vocalization is the fact that as you read the words, you're reading them in your mind. Like, I will grab a page from this book, right? And in my head, without making a noise, I'll say, "A brilliant analysis of Sumerian and other ancient texts by Princeton professor of history Julian Jaynes was published in 1976. The origin of consciousness is the breakdown of the bicameral mind. Argued." By the way, I haven't read this book. It's just the first one I picked up from the bookshelf. But if any of you have read this, apparently it's a good book. You let me know. But apparently there's a lot of secrets in world history that I haven't found out yet. So this is a book I should maybe speed read. But as you notice, as I'm reading this, I'm actually reading it in my mind. And this is actually something that slows you down in the process of reading. So when you want to reach some of these record limits when it comes to speed reading, this is one of the limiters. But this is one of the more advanced techniques. What I want to make sure you get from just watching this live on YouTube is a few techniques so that you can actually just apply this right now. And if you don't have a book in your hand, you might want to pick one up because we're going to practice these together. One of the biggest misconceptions that come from speed reading is this loss of comprehension. And I love the example that Jim Kwik uses in his program, teaching us about the difference between when you are casually driving. Have you ever had that experience when you drive your car, let's say to a usual spot, whether it's a local restaurant, maybe it's the gas station or the grocery store, and as you drive casually, there's a stop sign, maybe there's a few lights, there's cars that come and go, and you arrive at whatever destination you were going, you're like, what just happened? I feel like I just teleported here, and you kind of forgot the entire journey. And this is a lot of what happens when we're reading. We're reading and you find out you're going through a page, and then when the page is done, you're like, what did I just read? And so even as we're casually driving in a leisurely stroll, it seems that we're not focused on the task at hand. Now, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but imagine that you were in a Formula One car. Okay, maybe that's a little too extreme. Not a lot of us had a chance to do that. I know I haven't, but at least imagine being in a very nice sports car on a closed circuit track. Don't do this on a public road. We're on a closed circuit track. Let's stay safe here. And imagine that you have to do the best, fastest lap possible in this sports car, right? So the light turns green, you say go, and then you're driving. Think about the feelings that are coming up when you're coming up to a corner. Think about the ways you're accelerating, the ways that you're braking, the ways you're shifting gears. Now, if you're not driving a car, this might be a little harder to imagine, but at the same time, you realize that you are thinking of one thing and one thing only, driving that car. And so the experience you get is so much more present than when you're just going on a leisurely stroll in a vehicle where you might be thinking, oh, I wonder what happened at work today. I'm wondering, you kind of go into this meditation mode, and this is not the time you should be meditating. You should be driving, yet you don't get into an accident, which is surprising. So subconsciously, you still pick up things, but imagine that you were doing it at full speed. Just like in the race car example, you actually learn more, you retain more, and you practice more. And this is the concept that happens with speed reading. When you intentionally, very presently decide that you are going through a reading experience, no other thoughts come into your mind. You're very clear on the goal, and you get to go so much faster. So the faster you go, the more retention you get. And if you haven't signed up to get more of these insights from speed reading, make sure you do sign up to the masterclass. I know we've got the link being shared right now. Just click on that link. You can register. It's absolutely free, and it's going to go even more in depth around these concepts of speed reading. Now, what would be a basic thing that we can do? So if you do have a book, this is a technique that you'll be able to practice right away, which will increase your reading speed by at least 10%. Because I mentioned about one of the more advanced problems, which is the fact that we are reading as we are reading. Like we are verbalizing what we are reading in our minds, which actually slows us down. But here's one that we do a lot of times, right? I'll be reading a sentence, and as I read a sentence, I'll realize that I might not have caught that last word. I'll be going like, "You can't take it with you," goes the popular saying, but according to the secret doctrine, you can. And then you feel like you forgot a word, and then you're like, "Oh, let me read that again." And then you read the same line twice. This is actually a massive thing that slows you down. Is you either get lost in the words that you're reading, or you find that because you missed a certain word, you should go back and reread the entire paragraph, as if that single thing that you missed will destroy the structure of the entire book. And think about when you're watching Netflix, right? Like, has it happened sometimes that maybe you're just taking a pause, a sip of coffee or tea, and you lose focus with what's happening on the TV show, but when you get back into it, you don't necessarily need to pause the entire series unless you miss a really important part, but most of the time you can just disconnect for a moment, and then you get back right into it. And if you did miss a part, you can usually catch up, and by following the rest of the sequence, everything still pieces together. This is something we underappreciate within a book, is as we're reading, if you just forget a word, you should actually be able to continue going forward because the story will still connect. And even if a word or two were missed, the whole story still makes sense. The concepts you're trying to learn will still be internalized, and that will slow you down. Now, how do you actually apply something that allows you to make yourself go faster? You're going to feel like a child doing this, but as Jim Kwik loves to remind us, the best learners are children, right? And so here's the fun thing. Now, I already see some of you are mentioning you already have Quest All Access. If you have Quest All Access, you can already access the full quest for speed reading. You definitely want to do that. It's called Speed Reading. Go grab it. Or Super Reading. Super Reading is available in your All Access, but if you don't have the quest, this is not something you've explored yet with Mindvalley, just join the masterclass. It's absolutely free and you learn some amazing concepts. But here, I want to show you something you can do here, okay? I know Sumokesh is asking, when is the masterclass? When you click on that link, you'll be able to choose a time in your time zone. It'll make it really, really simple for you, okay? So here's the way that you prevent yourself from skipping lines. I'm going to do my best to show an example here on the camera. Is you have this magical instrument called a finger. And this sounds silly, right? But just the act of using your finger, and as you read, you actually use your finger to guide the line that you're reading. Okay? Now I know the screen is blurry, so you can't read what I have on this page. And I'm a little disaligned because this is really hard. I'm trying to coordinate. But the fact is just by using your index finger and just pointing towards the page under the line that you're currently reading and simply going like this. As you get to go through, and now your eyes will naturally be able to pick up where you are, and you'll be able to read at least 10% faster. This is one of the things you learn on the first day of the quest, and already you're getting massive success. I mean, this is the thing I love the most about going through this quest, is because every single day you would measure, because what you measure, you can improve. And you realize that you're adding these quick little tips that actually allows you to massively improve your speed reading. Now, Ashutosh is actually talking about having finished Superbrain today. So Superbrain is another quest we have with Jim Kwik, which is all about memory improvement. And if, for those of you who have All Access, you have both Superbrain and Super Reading. And here what we're focusing on is actually Super Reading. So if you did do Superbrain, definitely leave a comment here. And also, I'd love to know what was your experience with it. I know Super Reading was actually just as good, if not better than Superbrain, just because I was able to apply it. And it's so funny, I host a podcast, Superhumans at Work, and a lot of times the guests that I bring on the show ship me a book for me to read before their interviews. And I have sometimes like 9 interviews to do in a week, such as the week that I have now. Well, with the concept of speed reading, I was able to go through one of the books in 3 hours. Now, imagine how many more things you can do with all that time that you have extra. And this is really why speed reading is one of the best things you can learn. If you're someone that believes in growth, personal growth, this is really a skill that allows you to absorb more in less time. And I'm going to sneeze. Bless me. Sorry about that. So this was number 2. So I talked about when we read, we seem to voice what we read in our head. That slows us down. And I don't really have the technique. I haven't mastered that yet because that takes a lot of practice. But the one that is really easy to fix is the fact that we reread lines, right? Rereading lines slows us down, and by using the finger just as a little tool to follow along, it helps you drastically, right? So if you have a book in hand, I would encourage you to just take a few lines from that book and see what happens when you use your finger consciously. I know it looks silly, but it increases your speed so much, right? And the third thing is really the losing of the focus, right? So if you found yourself being able to read and you find yourself just being so distracted, you lose focus with what's going on. I appreciate the gesundheits that are coming in. Thank you so much. This is where speed reading is actually the solution to that problem. Because you're doing it at a faster speed, you're more present, you're more concentrated. And what I love from this quest and the masterclass, if you sign up, you can actually get a chance to be able to go and learn even more of the techniques that help with this. But again, when you apply this, it allows you to learn so much more. Like imagine what you could do when you absorb more with more concentration. As I mentioned, I did this about 2 years ago, and it's one of those quests that once I learned, these were techniques I could use forever. I mean, just this little finger technique is just something you can do all the time, and it will just make it so that you can listen to books so much faster when you have them in physical. Some people wonder, can you actually read on an iPad? So see-through, great question. It's absolutely correct. You can do it on the iPad. Although I will say I prefer the Kindle just because of the way that the letters appear, because it's less glossy, but the techniques apply the same. I just find myself being more exhausted reading those bright colored screens. So if I can get a physical book on the Kindle, I find it's easier to have that kind of paper look on it. So yes, all these techniques works on the digital reading, even if you're reading Medium articles, etc. And so if you have a book in hand, this is a good time to actually do another activity. I would suggest to do this right after. And what it is that it's a concept in management, right? It's actually Peter Drucker. He's a management consultant who says you can't improve what you don't measure. And so do you know what your current reading speed is, right? If we don't know what the current reading speed is, we don't necessarily have something that we know what we want to improve. And to calculate your reading speed is very simple. Grab whatever book that you have, and you want to set a baseline. You want to go ahead and just see where you start on a page and actually read through in a time of 1 minute, right? You set a timer for 1 minute, and then you start reading. And what you do is you count the number of lines that you actually read. And then by reading 1 or 2 lines, you can actually count the number of words per line. It's basic math, right? So what you do is you count the average number of words per line, you set a timer for 1 minute, and you read as much as you can, and you count how many lines you went through. And if you went through 50 lines, and well, let's use a more realistic number if you're just getting started. If you went through 20 lines of text and there's 10 words per line, guess what? You're at 200 words per minute. So this is really how you're able to do the math to know where that you start. And here's the beauty about learning anything about speed reading is no matter where you are very likely to become 3 times faster in reading. So if it takes you 10 hours to read a book, or it takes you 12 hours to read a book, you'll end up being able to do the same in 4 hours. Now, excuse me. Now, I want to be able to ask a question that came here about Sheila Smith, who asked about what will this help with ADD and ADHD. Now, this is actually something that would be more considered a clinical recommendation. I'm not too experienced with what is the best way to handle that, but here's what I would say, is as someone that just, chronically finds themselves very distracted, very fast thinking myself, I know that when I actually go and set like a goal to go fast in my speed reading, I don't find myself being distracted as much because I'm so immersed in the task at hand. So if you have ADD or ADHD, you'll find that, especially with children, if you say, hey, what you're trying to do is to hit a record, you're trying to really speed read and comprehend, and you kind of put those metrics in place where you actually are measuring that, it becomes much more exciting than just casually reading, because this is really what happens is as you casually read, you get very distracted easily. And so these are some of the concepts I wanted to make sure that you'd be able to absorb and take home. Matter of fact is if you go through the masterclass, which I know the team's been making sure, again, if you haven't said hi, Darren, make sure to give a big heads up to Darren. He's been making sure that you guys have the information. He's telling me the questions that are coming in as well. you want to go in and watch the masterclass. Now, it's so funny because Sumikish is watching the masterclass at the same time as this YouTube video. Probably not the best of ideas. You probably want to schedule it to be an hour later, or if you are jumping into the masterclass, you might want to pause this live, come back for the replay, but you are going to miss the Q&A that we're going to do right after. If you haven't signed up yet, this is really where you're going to get the meat and potatoes, or the kale and potatoes for those of you who are vegan. And Jim Kwik himself is going to share you these techniques. I'm simply a student of this, and this is why I do these lives. I'm someone who's went through so many of these quests and teachings at Mindvalley that I love to share some of the experiences that I have. It's very interesting because I just thought, as I was bringing this class, what are the things that I retain the most from going through the speed reading? Again, my speed went up 3 times, and the biggest thing is not about rereading the lines, using the finger to be able to follow along and read with intention that I am like a race car that keeps my focus in, as well as understanding that whenever I'm feeling myself that I'm actually reading the words, like saying them out loud, but in my head, is something that slows me down. I realize that I can turn that off. And when I practice turning that off, I can unleash a speed I've never seen before. And I finish a chapter going, wow, I was able to absorb all of that, and it's almost like it went right into the subconscious. It's a bit of a magic that happens there, and I'd highly encourage you to do it. So sign up to that masterclass, and I see here people are asking, can I log out again and I will get the masterclass? I will make sure that everybody gets to go to the masterclass. The link is being posted, and this is really what we wanted to share this week. So if you have practiced speed reading before, this is a good reminder, a good check-in, to realize that it's always a skill that you practice. It's always something you want to keep nurturing. If you go through that masterclass, you'll see it's a great refresher. If you've never explored this topic before, you'll realize this is extremely powerful. It'll unlock a whole new world on how you can go through some content, and know that whether you're reading nonfiction or fiction, it applies the same. You just get to have a lot more creative ideas come to you in a shorter amount of time. So if you've enjoyed this, we want to come live as much as possible to be able to share these ideas, interact with you. If you are live, do stick around. We're going to switch over to question modes. But if you are watching the replay, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn those notifications on so you can join us for the next time that we go live, which is Tuesdays at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 9:30 p.m. Hong Kong or Kuala Lumpur time, which is where the headquarters of Mindvalley is. And what we do at the end of these lives is we always go back into a bit of an interaction so we get to answer some of your questions. If you haven't watched this masterclass yet, definitely click that link that's being shared in the description and in the live chat if you're here with us live. And thank you so much for tuning in. As a recap, just make sure that you're using the finger as a follow-through. Know that when you go and read with intention of being focused and going at a high speed, it brings more understanding, faster learnings. And then finally, see what you can measure, because once you measure the baseline, you know what you can improve. So use the technique of just counting the average words per line in a book, take 1 minute to read as many lines as possible, and see where your benchmark is. And with that, you can see that if you're anywhere below 600, I know that there is vast amount of improvements that you can do, because most people start at a minimum to go to at least over 650 to 7. I've seen people go up to thousands. So that'll depend on how much practice you put in, but the quest will definitely be able to save you so much time. Masterclass will get you started on the right foot. So go check that out. We're gonna have a bit of an end slide here that's going on. So if you are watching live, don't go away. I'm gonna come back and interact with all of you. And if you're watching a replay again, I hope to see you on the next time. Take care, everybody. This has been Jason Campbell. We'll see you live next week.